Utah Representative Ken Ivory explained what he's discovered about the 30 by 30 initiative signed in an executive order by President Joe Biden. It aims to set aside over 720 million acres, or 30% of U.S. land and 30% of its ocean water, by the year 2030.
And now it's 30 by 30, which is to put the most stringent federal restrictions on 30% of all U.S. land and water by the year 2030 as a stepping stone to 50 by 50.
Ivory said conversion to clean energy and leaving resources in the ground would be devastating to Utah.
I had our legislative fiscal analyst run an analysis of what would that mean for Utah. Leave it in the ground, and if we took them at their word. They said it'd be an $11 billion reduction in state GDP and 93,000 jobs gone if we just took them at their word.
The 30 by 30 initiative is intended to expand natural conservation in an effort to control climate change. But in Utah, where a majority of the land is already federally owned and set aside as parks, this could have great implications.
In Utah, 67% of our lands in the state is public lands, is federally owned lands. And so, we've already got millions of acres in wilderness areas and in national parks and in national monuments and in this and in that.
Ivory said environmental groups are already advancing the goal, but in order to fulfill it, the federal government needs western states to take the lead. Many states like New Mexico have already signed on, but Ivory believes that Utah needs to protect what it already has, despite penalties or threats for not doing so.
And by the way, when they don't order the liquor, put them in jail. That's what I'm not joking about this. I'm not joking about it.
Think about all the things in your life that rely on energy, affordable, reliable energy. I mean, there's almost nothing that doesn't. And so to focus on land, property, the essence of our liberty, and energy, to take those choices away, that's something we ought to consider in where this is taking us.
And they're governing the public lands and the forests like it's a museum, kind of hands off, don't touch, don't do anything there. We just want it to be there. And so what it needs to be is more like a garden. You get in and manicure it and you take care of it and you bring the beauty out in it. And that's not happening now. We quit harvesting trees, and there's a direct parallel between when the trees quit harvesting and the fires started.
The initiative could even lead to the creation of a new Red Rocks Wilderness Act, preserving over 9 million acres, many of which are in southern Utah.
The Wilderness Act that they're talking about here, the Red Rock, why that's another, 9 million here, 9 million there, As you look at all of the lands that's contiguously controlled by the federal government in strict management across the southern end and up through the state, there's several million acres. It's all contiguous.
This is scary because as a private owner, they can come over and take my property, take my cows, and take my water rights. And we don't have any rights because they're taking all the properties they can from the people in Utah and several other states. And then they want to relocate us, and that's another scary problem. What are they going to do with us?
Biden already ordered a pause on new oil and gas leases on public lands and shut down construction of the Keystone Pipeline. Ivory said the Climate Change Act also aims to change the way America gets and uses its energy by decarbonization.
Rocky Mountain Power came out and said, okay, we're going to reduce our emissions by 98% by 2050. And they said, that's not good enough. 98% by 2050, that's not good enough. We want you to completely decarbonize in 15 years.
But in accordance with the New World Climate Accord, Ivory said China hasn't made any plans to comply. In fact, it has done just the opposite.
China's not doing anything on reducing their coal and fossil fuel. Their Paris climate commitment is come 2030, they'll start to think about what they might do to reduce carbon. Until then, they're adding a coal-fired power plant every week. They're adding 150 nuclear power plants and we're completely decarbonizing while they're adding baseload power. We're by definition moving towards intermittent power. That's what wind and solar is by definition.
Well, my concern is that it's a complete takeover by 2035 if you control energy, and you control like clean energy, and you don't have affordable, cheap energy, then you're priced out. Then you become reliant on the government, and maybe that is the ultimate goal. But it's the biggest thing is it's like when you take over property rights, when you take over 30% of the land grab, and then it moves to 50%, there would be a lot of eminent domain issues, property right issues, the very livelihood of just what this country is founded on, the freedom principles and liberty.
Ivory believes under America's constitutional rights, U.S. citizens have the right to question their constituents and stand up for what they believe in. He calls it an imbalance of the federal government and the states that our forefathers warned us about.
The powers delegated to the national government are few and defined. The powers reserved to the states are numerous and indefinite. He talks about the powers to the states will be all the things that concern the life, liberties, and properties of the people. So when we talk about our system, it's this, right? We've got the division, but the balance of power is this. Have you ever seen a diagram, anything like that, as to what our government is? Never, right? It's this. It's always this. This is our government. That's not our government. The way John Dickinson put it, he said it'll be the state's own fault if they allow the federal government to interfere in the things of their jurisdiction. And I think that's right. The framers counted on the states to impose the limits on the national government, because without limits, they just grow limitlessly.
Ivory plans to present a bill to the Utah legislature this session asking to create a commission looking into federal overreach on how Utah can decipher whether or not they agree with what's being forced upon the states.
And so on everything that has federalism implications, the Federalism Commission will decide, do we take action or not? And if we take action, which action will we take? And then no longer will we simply just let the federal government encroach upon the state jurisdiction without noticing and making an affirmative decision. What are we going to do to protect our jurisdiction and protect the balance, which is intended to secure the rights of the people? As we lead out on that, I believe many other states will follow. As we provide that systematic process, there are many states looking for a way to deal with this, and we lead in Utah. That's what we do.
Most important thing to do is get educated and then go hold accountability for what you've hired your representative for.
Fight and keep fighting. Use the laws of the land. They are in your favor. You just got to make sure your government knows they're in your favor.
The goal we've been working for is to get the land, the public lands, in state control and state management so that we can decide things on a local level. And that's what it's all about.
A new website, igovern.us, allows people to find out more information on these actions. In St. George, Melissa Anderson, Community Education News.